Welcome to One on One. I'm Greg Bassey, your host from the Salisbury Independent newspaper. It's a big day here at PAC 14 because we have the man who's about to be in the spotlight election-wise for the next several months, Anthony Gutierrez. Welcome, Anthony.
Thank you.
So you are in charge of the election office here in Wicomico County, and things are about to start happening. I don't think people realize that early voting starts next week.
That's right. We're a week away from early voting starting June 14th on Thursday at the Civic Center once again, and it'll run for 8 consecutive days through Thursday, June 21st, including Saturday and Sunday.
Saturday and Sunday voting.
That's correct.
Is that a first?
No, we've had that since the inception, yes.
Now, as a newspaper reporter, I hate this because I write the big election preview stories right before Election Day. Then you guys sneak in this early voting stuff, and I don't know when to put the stories in the paper that tell people about candidates. But I'll get over that. I'll get over that. But early voting has really turned out to be a great thing.
Yes, it has. A lot of our voters appreciate the fact that they can come in a week prior to, including those weekends and evenings. It's open 10 a.m. to 8 p.m., 8 days in a row. And that's more convenient for people with jobs or do a lot of traveling or have family things going on.
Has it lowered the amount of people who vote absentee, I guess?
We have seen a little bit of a decrease, and that's also because when someone calls to get an absentee ballot, we mention early voting, and a few people have taken us up on that.
Right. Now, what a lot of people don't realize is that the primary, it's really just sort of a party exercise. It's an election, but it's the clubs, the political clubs, sort of, selecting the people that they're going to put up in the general election. So it's a little bit different. And then in this year, there's not that many races in Wicomico. I guess there's, 4 or 5 races that are important?
Well, there's actually quite a few contests on the ballot. What voters will see when they get their sample ballot in the mailing, which those have gone out in the past few weeks, are there a lot of candidates who are running uncontested.
Right.
And as you mentioned, up to now, it has been the party choosing who they want to represent them in the November general. However, this time we've got elected Board of Education, which is a nonpartisan contest. That has a little bit of difference in the rules that they follow. And one example is that the number of candidates who file determines whether or not there's a primary. So in Councilmanic Districts 1 and 4, we had enough candidates file for those 2 contests to trigger a primary. So for about half of our polling places in the county, unaffiliated, Green Party, Libertarian, and other non-Democrat or Republican voters will be able to go out and vote what's called a nonpartisan ballot. When they go to those polls, again, Districts 1 and 4 only, then they'll get a ballot with just Board of Ed District 1 or 4, depending on where they live.
See, now I'm the editor guy. I'm supposed to know this stuff, and I did not know there was a primary for the unaffiliated. I thought they would have just all run in the general.
And for those other voters, Districts 2, 3, 5, and we also did not have enough candidates file for the 2 Board of Ed at-large seats.
Right.
If we had had one more person file for at-large, the whole county would have had that nonpartisan ballot. But again, unaffiliated, other party voters in Districts 1 and 4 have that option. The others do not, but they will certainly participate in the November general.
So in District 1, there's like 3 people on the ballot, so we'll narrow it to 2?
That's correct.
Okay. So the primary will narrow it to 2. So that means that I do need to go vote. I'm an independent voter. I'm not affiliated with a party. So normally I don't vote in the primaries, but I can vote for a school board.
That's correct. Now that we have
if I lived in that district.
In Districts 1 or 4.
Right.
Correct.
That makes sense. Does that complicate things for you, having now a whole another school board thing, or are you just able to easily add that on in terms of what you guys do?
Well, it is new, and anything new to the process, we need to train our judges a different way. We have a few more supply things in their bag of supplies to roll out on Election Day. So we certainly want to get through the primary and do lessons learned afterward, see if there's anything we need to change for November. But I don't believe it'll be a big complication.
Right. There's so much talk about voter fraud and all this kind of crazy stuff.
Sure.
I don't know what goes on elsewhere, but when I voted in Wycomico County and in Worcester County, it's a machine, it's a system. And like you go in there, first of all, everyone who's in there, the people you're voting with and the judges. Um, and I can't see any room for any kind of a variation. I mean, they're very strict about what goes on there. There's not a lot of kidding in there. It's all friendly. But I just don't know where voter fraud could occur.
I think that's a good point that you make, that it is customer service based, but at the same time, there are lots of security measures that we've always had in place. Now, traditionally, we've had Republican and Democrat poll workers to make sure that each party is represented fairly, and all voters, of course, unaffiliated, other parties, etc. But now that we've had concerns now about fake news, Russian hacking, things like that, we know that many of our voters take that very seriously. So those security measures, which we've had in place all throughout the elections, those are much more important now. And another thing I'd like to mention is that we are so grateful to the taxpayers for providing us a new facility. We're no longer on Bateman Street, where we had a very nice home thanks to Bob and Barbara Cambarn, our landlords, for about 13 years.
Right.
But we're in a new facility at 345 Snow Hill Road, and it's doubled the amount of space. Anyone who walks into the building can see that it's much more comfortable. I believe it's going to be a better experience for the voters who come in and participate in our services, but more importantly, the security. A few months ago, we had a representative from the Department of Homeland Security come and do a security assessment. And we've been able to add so many security features since January when we moved in, actually since we consolidated our operations,
Right.
that I'm very grateful to the taxpayers for providing that. And again, that security is manifest in the new building.
Yeah, it's the old Shin's paint store.
That's correct.
The way it's built, it's a very prideful thing. It looks like we take our elections seriously, and the Board of Elections matters, and we've got a nice facility for them, and it's terrific.
Yes, we had the former paint store facade or the building
Right.
shell since the new voting system came on in 2016 for the presidential. We needed humidity control, things like that for the paper ballots and the new scanners. So this fall, they added an addition to it, and we've moved in and consolidated around January 2nd.
Yeah, it looks great. Now, can people just stop in and say hi, and that's also where I would go to register to vote?
Absolutely. The deadline to register passed this last Tuesday evening, but
For the primary.
for the primary election, yes. But anyone's very welcome to come in. It's like a 3-minute tour. I'm so glad and so proud to give them a tour of what their tax dollars. And when they come in, they won't see cathedral ceilings, and we've never asked for a Taj Mahal.
Right.
It's a very comfortable, a very safe, and a very secure work environment. And the workers and the election judges are the ones who benefit the most.
You guys did it right.
We're very pleased with the outcome, and I think our voters will agree with that. I had mentioned, we spoke briefly, touched on voter registration ending, but I do want to mention that persons who have not registered to vote yet can still go to the early voting center Thursday, June 14th through Thursday, June 21st, and participate in same-day registration only during the early voting period.
Really?
Yes.
Another thing I didn't know. Yeah. Now, you could probably get pulled into this political stuff, and you stay out of it completely, but what's the trend? Are there more Republicans in the county or Democrats? What is our registration like?
It's been pretty consistent. We do have more Democrats than Republicans. I can't remember the percentages right offhand, but of the 65,000 voters, it's been fairly consistent through the years. As a matter of fact, today is my 12th anniversary as election director.
Congratulations.
Thank
Wow.
you so much. But that's been a consistent trend as far as the breakdown. We did have an uptick, I would say, after the presidential 2016 of unaffiliated, people change it to unaffiliated, but that seems to be coming back now that the primary is coming up in 2018. They do want to be affiliated, it seems to be able to vote for such offices as U.S. Senator, Governor, etc.
I like the paper ballot system so much better, and I don't know if it's easy or not for you. When they had those Diebold machines there a couple years ago where you would just push it and you had no idea what the button did or where the vote went, I love having that paper thing to look at.
I've worked in this industry for 23 years now, and I've worked with both touchscreen, paper ballot, and a hybrid system at one of my jobs. So there are pluses and minuses to all systems, and of course, the policymakers, the governors, the legislatures, or the local governments get to choose. And as election officials, we administer the elections however way the equipment we're given, et cetera, to the best of our ability. So you're right, a lot of people like that feature that if something really went wrong with the scanning unit or something, you still have that paper ballot as a backup. However, a couple things I would say about paper ballot system is that it's very difficult to count 65,000 ballots in a hand recount.
Right.
We've seen that in numerous occasions. And the second thing, the touchscreen would give the voter a second chance if they made a mistake. So let's say that you're pushing the buttons and you get to vote for 3 for Judge of Orphans Court, for
Right.
example, and you touched 4. Well, the machine can tell you, I'm sorry, you're trying to overvote. Please try again.
Right.
In a paper ballot, especially when the voter has requested an absentee and they're filling it out at home, if they accidentally vote for 4, or even the other contest where you vote for 1 and they've marked 2, or perhaps they've marked the person, oh, I made a mistake and I'm erasing and I'm marking
Right.
the other, the machine's going to see both of those and not count it
Right.
in that scenario, in that instance. Another thing that I would mention when people ask is that a lot of voters, when we store the ballots for 22 months after a federal election, we're putting them into other storage boxes. We can't tell whose ballot it is, of course, so it's just marked ballots at random.
Right.
We'll see lots of check marks or X's. And I think that may be just a holdover from the way voters used to doing it. But if you don't completely darken the circle,
Right.
and you happen to make a check mark that didn't quite hit all the oval, and let's say it's for president, and that's really what you wanted. Of course, all the contests are as important as any other on a ballot.
Right.
But if for president you were in a hurry or something, even at the polls, and you marked it, but you hit the check mark right in the middle of Judge of Orphans Court, for example, on the back page or something, the machine will, in that scenario, again, made up scenario, think that you didn't want to vote for president, but you wanted to vote for Judge of Orphans Court, and you'll get the message, thank you for voting today. You'll get your I voted sticker and you'll leave.
Right.
So that's an example where that person thought they voted for president, but because they didn't actually darken the oval, we don't have that second chance to help them
Right.
make sure that every single vote counts.
I would have thought the scanner kind of kicked that back, but I never really thought about it.
There are tolerances,
Okay.
but again, if I'm in a hurry, and I'm signing my signature or something, or I'm filling out a form, I don't always do it perfectly. And of course, some voters have some health issues that maybe they can't do things exactly. And
Right.
so the first column of our new ballot design does say completely darken the oval. But as I mentioned, when we're storing ballots for long-term storage, we still see those check marks and X's. And so it makes me wonder as an election official, gosh, I really hope that the scanner saw it and the voter hit the right in the middle. So again, pluses and minuses. This is the system that the voters chose and that the legislature and the governor gave us, and we're doing the best we can as election officials.
I like it. It feels good. It doesn't feel as good as it used to. I used to love the old voting machines with the toggles, because you'd go in, you'd close the curtain, and
Right.
you go in there and you'd reach up and do all that stuff. And sometimes I remember the Bill Clinton, George Bush in 92, 88, 92, just how good it felt to get up there and grab that Bush toggle and click that thing. It felt like I was like voting, and
Absolutely.
it was really important. So you kind of lose that anger when you're on the paper ballot, but it's kind of close. You can scribble it really hard, I guess, if you want. But yeah, I can't. It's amazing that people might make that error. I never thought about that.
And we do our best to put up signs, and again, it is right there on the ballot, but unfortunately, habit or being in a hurry, sometimes people don't always follow instructions.
Right. So those ballots are kept for 22 months. Another thing I didn't know.
Yes, in the federal election, and because we always have the congressional contest, that makes it a federal election for us.
Right. Do you guys look for sort of consistencies to see that if things are voting correctly, like either in terms of precincts or whatever? So if there's any like weird variations, if you get an area that votes overwhelmingly for someone else, I mean, do you guys monitor it that way?
We don't monitor it as far as the results, but we certainly have a lot of post-election audit processing to do, and most of that is promulgated by the State Board of Elections regulation and guidelines that we have to conduct those post-election audits and report to the state board. And if there are any kind of anomalies as far as how many people checked in, let's say 100 people checked in at the electronic poll book and there's either 98 votes on the machine or 102 votes, now you've got a discrepancy you have to resolve. Those are the kind of things we look for, but certainly not, wow, this precinct usually votes Democratic and so candidate, Republican won or something. No, we, as you said
Like
before,
maybe we should go look at that, or
well, that's for others to do in the
Right.
process. It's an open process and a lot of stakeholders to do, but as far as election officials, we stay away from the political part of that.
Right. Now you mentioned the paper ballots take longer, and as a reporter, that drives me crazy because I've always said the polls closed at 7. Why is it midnight? And I don't know. We're still waiting for votes from Nanacoke. I don't understand that sometimes.
And that also has to do a little bit with our facility. Again, in 2016, when we went to the new paper ballot system, we were between 2 buildings. And so our operations were spread apart. We're now in 1 building, and as I mentioned earlier, anything new is going to bring about problems that have to be solved for future. So it still could be some delay, even though we're all under 1 roof.
Right.
That situation there on Snow Hill Road, we're having a lot of people come back after the polls closed to that. It's kind of a triangle around our building between Pepsi and Backstreet Grill. So
Right.
some traffic problems with Snow Hill Road being a major intersection. We've reached out to the law enforcement community, and the Sheriff's Department's going to provide us with some support, and we've talked to the city about things. But unfortunately, there's always going to be some things that come up which need to be addressed for future. So we'll do it as best we can and as quick as we can, but our motto certainly is accuracy, not speed.
See, that's another thing I never thought about. When I was a young reporter and we had the machines with the clickers, my memory was that they would read the numbers at the site, then call the numbers. Actually, it used to call to the Daily Times. That was they had the phone bank where the numbers came in. So maybe that made it faster. But now you haul the ballots back.
Yes, our jurisdiction does not do any kind of modeming of results, and
Okay.
again, that's a security feature. So results are brought back, and I don't want to give away the keys to the castle,
Sure.
but we don't do any kind of electronic transfer.
Yeah, I think people used to call like with the tally from each machine, and then it would be assembled somewhere centrally, and that's
Right.
how we got the numbers.
And that's how I started out in the business, being on the other end, the switchboard end of that phone call. And we had a contest back home in Kansas where it was a state rep race and numbers were transposed.
Ooh.
And so on election night, I can't remember if it was the incumbent representative lost, but came out later, oh, someone heard it wrong on the phone. So then we went to, okay, no more calling in, we're going to fax.
Right.
Or we're going to text, or
Fax
what have
machine is
you.
going to change the world. Remember that?
It did for a while, sure.
There was some controversy last year with the voting machines, or the year before, where you all had the new machines and you had no place to store them. And there was a proposal. The county executive said, well, we'll put them in the basement of the library. There's a lot of space there. Library pushed back. But these things really do need a secure environment. You can't just have the machines anywhere.
Absolutely, and again, as I said, just in time, Wacomico had the new facility up and ready before, well, I guess in response to the 2016 concerns about security, et cetera. So it came at just the right time. And there are a few more things we can do, and we'll certainly be looking at that in future budget years. But we absolutely understand that county budgets are getting smaller, and there's a lot of departments, a lot of needs. Just the other day, with all the rain and the roads that need to be managed, we're just one part of the county government puzzle, and we understand that.
It's always seemed to me like Wacomico's got a lot of polling places. How many do we have?
For this primary, we only have 31. We usually have 32, but due to some scheduled school construction projects, we had to make some changes. So I'm glad you brought that up. Voters should really pay attention to their sample ballot, which has been mailed out in the past few weeks. It gives a lot of information. Certainly the sample ballot they're going to vote on, but their assigned polling place and other information about the process.
So the polling places will be on the sample ballot. Just make sure you look at your sample ballot for any possible changes.
Or if anyone has misplaced their ballot, they can go online to the State Board of Elections website, a load of information on the election, www.elections.maryland.gov, and they can certainly call our office. That's why we're there, 410-548-4830.
In 2008, turnout was amazing because the Obama surge. What's turnout been like since then?
Traditionally in Wacomico County for a gubernatorial primary, we could see about 35% turnout. Of course, we're always hopeful that everyone will exercise their right to vote.
So, with all the attention to voter turnout, is it something that your office can advocate? Is there anybody out there who kind of advocates for people to get out and vote and to explain the system? Or are you guys just basically focused on counting the results?
We're certainly focused on doing the administration of the election in an accurate, secure, and nonpartisan manner. As far as turnout, that's more driven by the candidates, and for a primary or even the general, the parties or a ballot initiative group. We respond to any group that asks us to come out and talk about voter registration, absentee voting, the mechanics and the processes of it. And we would certainly like to be more involved with voter outreach and generating more turnout. We support those groups and those efforts when we can, but as we talked about before, limited resources, we really need to focus on the security and the accuracy first, and whatever time and resources we have left over. In a gubernatorial primary, for example, traditionally in Wacomico County, it's only about 35% turnout. We're always hopeful for every voter to exercise their right to vote. In November, we'll expect maybe double that in most cases. And again, with lots of uncontested candidates in the primary, I'm not sure that's going to help the turnout, but in November, not only will all contests have candidates, but they'll have a write-in option. And November is also the time when you'll have ballot questions, so that might also generate more excitement and turnout.
You mentioned the write-in stuff. I've always been intrigued by that, and as a reporter, I've asked for years for someone to send me a list of all the write-in names, and it's, I think they shared it one time, but then they realized they shouldn't share it. What kind of bizarre stuff do you see in the write-ins?
Well, there are bizarre things, and you know, people like to express themselves, sometimes in vulgar ways, of course. And because of that, I believe, before I got here, before my term as director, the legislature or state board passed either a regulation or a law that we don't release those
Right.
unless someone has filed as a registered write-in, and the deadline will be 1 week before the November general.
There's a list of eligible write-ins, and you ignore the rest.
That's correct.
Right.
We don't tally, we don't report.
But you get a lot of Mickey Mouses and
Supermans, things like that. Sure, absolutely.
So when I write the obituaries every week, 3-4 times a year, there's always someone who was an election judge for 50 years who passes, and she was like a great local volunteer type person. Who are your election judges, your poll watchers? Where do they come from? How do you get them? Who are they?
We've had, as you say, judges who've worked the polls for many years and decades even, and a lot of word of mouth. Once a judge gets in a good polling place and they have a good team, then if someone drops off for some reason, they perhaps pass away or move away because of job or family situation, then they do a great job of bringing someone else in that they believe will be a good fit. But we're always looking for other persons to come on and start the process and join the teams.
And they get paid, like, how much do they get paid a day?
This election, the election judges get $250, but a chief judge, who's the supervisor of each polling place, one Democrat, one Republican, they get paid a little more because they have a little bit more responsibility.
The last ballot, we had like 11 or 12 charter amendments on the ballot. And I wrote a lot about how it's going to really complicate things at the polls for people to be in there having to wade through these charter amendments, these referendum things, which I'm convinced that people don't really understand what they're voting for. And I feel like people with charter amendments kind of either vote all yes or all no. They were all overwhelmingly approved, but my concern was it would slow down voting, that people would take too long in the voting booths. And I was told that that wasn't true. It didn't slow down voting at all. But I noticed this time there were some more charter amendments that were talked about. And in the discussion, it was like, well, we don't want to put too many on there because it'll slow people down. This time, there's about 34 races on the ballot in November. So my question is, do the referendum charter amendment things, do they slow people down? Is it really more difficult for you to have to deal with that, or is it just one more question on the ballot?
That's a great question, and we monitor things a little bit more closely during the early voting period. on election day with 32 polling places, or 31 this primary. We're a little bit more spread thin on resources, so when it's at the Civic Center in one place, we can focus our attention. And one of the things we looked at in the 2016 presidential was the line, the amount of time it took voters to go through the process. So when they walked up to the Civic Center, by the time they got to the front, I want to say it was 20, 25 minutes average. But once they got in and actually had their ballot in their hand, it only took, I believe, 7 or 8 minutes. And of course, there were not nearly as many contests as there are now for this primary.
Right.
But again, I don't know that that's a long amount of time to wait. But then going to the scanner, there was another period of having to wait while other people were in front of you. So I don't think it made the process longer, and perhaps that's because a lot of voters maybe looked at those questions and skipped them. I don't know.
Yeah.
We've not gone in that depth.
Yeah, you see that all the time where you want a healthy ballot, but you don't want it to be too big. But you don't want just one race because then no one's going to show up.
Right, but it's also part of the process that we get information from a lot of different sources. Again, the parties now are using the primary to choose who they want to go on in November to represent them, but the legislature can do statewide questions, and we do have constitutional amendments every now and again. I believe we have 1 or 2 for the November 2018, and the counties have the right, I suppose you would say, that until August, the deadline, they can put local questions, and of course that helps them get the feel of the community for doing things, local not initiatives, but local legislative processes, etc. So that's part of their part in the process too.
All right, well, tell people to get out and vote.
Absolutely. June 26th, Tuesday, June 26th, or early voting starts next week, Thursday, June 14th through June 21st at the Civic Center, 10 a.m. to 8 p.m., including the weekend.
He's Anthony Gutierrez. He's about to be the man for several months here as we count all of our votes and figure out who's going to lead us for the next 4 years. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
I'm Greg Bassett from the Salisbury Independent newspaper. Another edition of 101 right here on PAC 14.
First Shore Federal is proud to support PAC 14 and one-on-one. We'd encourage every business to support PAC 14 and pick a program and support it, and let's make a difference.